Good evening and welcome to Millennium Stage. And now please give a warm welcome to Saxophone Genesis.
Thank you so much. How very exciting to be here. I'm Doug O'Connor. I play the saxophone. And nearly a year ago, we started down this path to get 5 new pieces written for the saxophone in the context of a bunch of other instruments, not necessarily as a soloist instrument, but woven into a fabric of a variety of different musical situations. And what we started with are commissions that were open-ended. This is very unique. We told these 5 wonderful composers, hey, you write whatever you want to write for whatever instruments you write, as long as you want to write or as short as you want to write. And so that's how we started it off, with generous funding from the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. Thank you so much to them, to the Bowling Green State University Mid-American Contemporary Music Center, and of course to almost 60 individual supporters who contributed to our Kickstarter to make the music on today's program and the musicians possible to pull this all off in style. So nearly a year of effort for 15 really hardworking people. So excited to get this started right off. So without further ado, will you please welcome to the stage our first composer, Dr. Baljinder Sekhon.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening. It's wonderful to see so many people out to hear these new pieces by 5 composers, 4 of whom I'm honored to be sharing a program with. On behalf of all the composers and performers in tonight's event, we want to thank Doug O'Connor for a year's worth of really hard work and pulling lots of funding together to bring these pieces into existence. So thank you, Doug. As Doug said, I'm the composer of the first piece. My name's Baljinder Sekhon, and I realize there's program notes, so I'll keep this very brief. This piece is for 2 instrumentalists and a vocalist, and live electronics. The electronic component of the piece is just thought of as another instrumental component of the work, and you'll hear the sounds blending and mixing in with their performance on the stage. I'll be performing the electronic sounds from the back of the hall through a sampler. All the electronic sounds are actually recordings of these 3 musicians. They traveled and I recorded them making all different sounds that their instruments made, and I manipulated them in various ways and created the electronic fabric for the piece. So I hope you enjoy the piece and enjoy the rest of the concert.
been knocking on a door. It opens. I have been knocking from the inside. With madness! Great fun!
Baljinder Sekhon, everybody. So after the show, we have the great fortune of having 4 out of the 5 composers featured this evening here with us in the audience. Isn't that wonderful? So please go talk to them about their music and don't be a stranger. The one who wasn't able to make it, unfortunately, he has to teach at school. He's Jeffrey Mumford, our next composer, out in Oberlin, Ohio. So I'm going to say a few words about this next piece and about how my relationship with Jeffrey started. So I was introduced to his music first through Christine Lamprea, a wonderful cellist, a great friend of mine, through Astral Artists. Yay, Astral Artists, yay, Allegro music out there. And she played a beautiful performance of his cello concerto, and I thought this music was really evocative and wonderful. I wrote to him. It was years later before I played any of his music. There was a duo that Ben and I played a while back here on this stage for cello and alto saxophone, and now he's written this wonderful piece called An Assemblage of Possibility for harp, cello, and tenor saxophone. And what's interesting about this to me is he writes for the tenor saxophone entirely in the high range. So there's almost this countertenor-like quality, this really thick, sonorous, really sostenuto kind of lovely tone that it's really atypical of a lot of the tenor saxophone repertoire that I know. If any of you are any Elliott Carter fans out there, this is a student of Elliott Carter and really writes some wonderful music. This is unique to me of the music of Jeffrey Mumford's that I've heard. So I'm going to go get a tenor saxophone, and I'll be right back, and we'll do Assemblage of Possibilities. Thanks. Thank you so much. That was An Assemblage of Possibility by Jeffrey Mumford, DC, originally from DC. We have a special guest who's going to come tell you about this next piece. I knew him briefly when I was a student at the Eastman School of Music. He's the head of composition there. His name is Robert Morris, and he is one of the preeminent set theorists and composers in the world. And we're so honored to get to play a piece by him and to have him here to speak with us today. It's really been a joy working with him. Please welcome Bob Morris to the stage.
Hello, everyone. It's really great to be here and to see many people here at this concert. I'm very pleased to be part of this, and I want to thank, of course, all the performers and the people who put together this thing, and the donors and all that goes along with this. It takes a lot of work to put together a concert of this quality, and it's wonderful to be part of it. About my piece, it's in two parts, part one and part two. That's the mathematical part. And it involves two different saxophones. The first one is soprano saxophone and piano, and the second one is alto saxophone and piano. I'm planning to revise these pieces so it can be played by the tenor and baritone saxophones, which play an octave lower than the ones we are going to hear today. This piece is called Primitive Roots, and that might evoke certain kinds of things about saxophones to you, but it actually is a mathematical term. It turns out a lot of things in mathematics have connections with music, and even the names of their structures do. But in this case, primitive root is a kind of structure that I was working with without knowing it many, many years ago, and then I discovered that this structure was underlying the properties of a 12-tone row I was using, and I figured out a way to make a longer string than 12 of 36 notes. And then these 6 notes would be made into a loop, and the property of this loop is that if you take every other note of the loop, you get the same thing back, only at a different pitch level. If you take every third note, you get the same thing back at another pitch level. So it's kind of a magical kind of mandala, and it's used in this piece. In the first part, it's used in cycles of itself, so the instruments kind of play more or less together, following sort of the same path, oscillating around this loop. In the second piece, they play the loops kind of in counterpoint with each other, and that means there's a lot more conversation in the composition. So I hope that helps. Bye.
Bob Morris.
Bob Morris. Thank you so much for that delicious treat. That was great. So our next piece, another former professor of mine at the Eastman School of Music, Bob Hasegawa. I had his microtonal music theory class, and it was great. And then McGill took him away from us. So that's okay. We have him down here. And the Arret duo, Jake Harpster and myself, we're actually going up to McGill in February to play this music, some more of his music, and some of his colleagues and students' music. So we're really excited about that. So would you please welcome Bob Hasegawa to the stage to tell you about Ajax is All About Attack.
Thanks, Doug. It's a real honor to be here with such an adventurous and varied group of musicians, with both composers and interpreters. I first worked with Doug back at Eastman, and Jake and Doug, as the Arret duo, played an older piece of mine, Ajax is All About Attack, about 2 years ago. And they played that piece so beautifully, I knew that when they approached me for this project, I wanted to write a sequel for them. So this is actually Ajax is All About 2 for alto saxophone and metal percussion. Jake is playing vibraphone and an assortment of cymbals on this piece. There's 2 techniques that are used. I'll keep it very brief, but one is multiphonics. The saxophone can actually produce chords or harmonies, not just single notes, but clusters of notes. So you'll hear some of those in this piece as it progresses. The other is microtonality, and the saxophone will often be playing notes in between the notes of a piano. It can play in this piece up to 24 different notes per octave instead of the usual 12. So the piece itself is a kind of long meditation on sound color. It explores these chords, these multiphonics in the saxophone, and especially the blends between the metal sounds of the percussion instruments and the breathy sounds of the saxophone. I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoy Ajax is All About Attack too.
Bob Hasegawa. Thank you. All right, we're going to rally the troops here and play our final work by Osnat Netzer. I was pleased to meet Osnat and many of the other musicians and composers involved with this project down at the University of South Florida in April 2018 for their biannual New Music Conference. So that was hosted by Dr. Baljinder Sekhon at the time, who is also here. And with that, I'll have Osnat tell you about her own work while we set up for it. This is Osnat Netzer.
Hello, thank you everybody. I'm really excited to be here and to hear this premiere with you. So yes, Doug and I met about a year ago, and we've since performed together and collaborated, and this is for me a big culmination of the work we've done so far. Now, the piece you're going to hear is called Consumed By, and it's for 8 musicians. A few things you can think about or listen to while you're experiencing this piece. It's all about the beat. So beat in music can come in many shapes and many ways. One way you're going to hear the beat is when 2 instruments are playing very, very closely together and their sound waves are canceling each other out at regular intervals, and that creates what we call a beat or pulse. And you're going to hear an actual pulse. I'm fascinated by rhythm. I've been fascinated with rhythm for a long time. And I've always wanted to write a piece that can really take this fascination farther. And so I've used a lot of different ways of thinking about rhythm. One interesting way for me is that rhythm is really something we feel in our bodies. It's not just something we listen to or count. It's really something that even as a listener or as a player, we embody it. And we certainly, this is why we say, oh, rhythmic feel, right? This is something musicians often say, and listeners. So one thing I like to do is metric modulation, where it's when you feel a certain way, when you feel the rhythm in a certain way, and then an element you didn't know, you didn't think of or feel as the beat suddenly becomes prominent, it becomes a new beat. So it kind of takes you off kilter a little bit. Another thing to listen for in this piece is that I've written it especially for the players that you'll hear. And what is unique to many of these players is that many of them are incredible classical musicians, but also play other genres and even improvise in other genres. And I wanted to honor that and use that for this piece. So you'll hear, some of the sections you'll hear are not fully notated. There will be solos for specific people in the ensemble. And each person with what they are strong with. I listened to their recordings and talked to them and came up with ways for them to express themselves that are unique to them. So these are just a few things to listen for. I hope you enjoy the piece. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the Millennium Stage, to all of you, to the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, to Bowling Green State, to all our individual supporters, all the musicians, and all the composers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us at the Millennium Stage. For more information about upcoming Millennium Stage programming, please visit